I don't know why people have this fixation on like tracking clicks and opens. Just don't track clicks and opens. That's like number one, like don't do that. Sometimes what you're offering directly is not what people want, but we've had success kind of like flipping that around because I've every company do well through email. Like there's just certain companies that won't do well through email.
I am Cynthia Handal. I'm a GTM advisor for Parakeet, an infrastructure tool for cold email. I'm really excited to be here today because I actually have one of my favorite people here today. This is Justin Chi. He's the CEO and founder of Cold Email Hackers, and he's probably the best cold emailer I know. He was my mentor. He taught me everything I know. So before I continue talking about how amazing Justin is, I'm going to give it to Justin just to introduce himself and tell us who he is.
Yeah, nice to be here. We've talked a lot over, during your time at Chimera, at other companies, just had a chance to kind of share notes on cold email. I've done SDR work for a number of companies. Prior to starting Cold Email Hackers, I was the #1 SDR at ZoomInfo. That was where I started using email. I used to be a hardcore phone guy. I used to just cold call all day, 200 calls, 300 calls a day, right? That was my method before. I'm sort of figured out cold email as ZoomInfo. And how the company was started was I was sending a lot of emails to sales leaders, marketing leaders. They liked what I had to say. And it pretty much just snowballed from there. The company started as a side hustle, turned into what it is today. We're at about 30 or so customers at this point and looking to grow. But overall, that's just kind of a quick brief on us.
That's exciting. I guess I'm just curious to know,
Yeah.
when you were an SDR, you obviously have a quota of calls, emails, LinkedIn messages to do. So how did that transition happen to when you found out that you're booking like hundreds of meetings via email when the rest of your coworkers are just like doing 100, 200 calls a day, and then you're like breaking records, crashing it?
Yeah, so every role I started, I always start like first 2, 3 weeks, we just go really hard, right? So that's how I started the role, right? I was just making a ton of cold calls, just figuring out the messaging, that kind of stuff. And once I started figuring out emails, I spent a lot of time in our CRM. I would spend a lot of time building lists, kind of segmenting by keywords, a lot of the same stuff I teach now. And, I started having success with email. I kind of realized the calls weren't really necessary. It sounds kind of cocky to say, but like at the time, I was just doing so much output compared to my teammates that they couldn't really, like they were trying to get me to make that 75 calls. And honestly, like I'll say right now, I was kind of faking those dials. But they basically, it was just kind of hard to get rid of me because I was getting so many meetings compared to everyone else.
And back then you were just emailing from your main domain, right?
Yeah. So there was a domain called as an email or something .zoominfo.com, and it was attached to an outreach setup or whatever. And we were just sending from one inbox. I got shut down a couple times. And a lot of times I wasn't even verifying the emails. I would get shut down and I just started using Neverbounce to clean up the emails. And that was the only thing I was doing. We weren't tracking opens. We weren't tracking clicks back then even, but I was sending like 400 or 500 emails a day from a primary inbox, just one inbox. And we can't do that anymore.
It was like from outreach, or was it purely manual?
It was from outreach. It was from outreach.
It was from out. But I mean, I think that you were doing the hard work, which is why a lot of SDRs and BDRs fail, because even though you were faking the calls, you were doing the work. Like you were investing your time going into the CRM, being relevant. I assume you probably figured out how to make better cold emails than the rest of your team, while everybody was just doing copy paste generic templates. You were writing out templates and sequences that were working for you, and that's what made you stand out from the rest of the crowd.
Right.
So that's how you get started in the cold email space. What would you say sets you apart? What are you doing specifically that makes you so different?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, all the information is out there, right? Like when I first started, the multi-inbox, multi-domain sending thing wasn't as popular. It was starting to be popular, right? So this was pretty early on. I think people were kind of aware that you need multiple domains, but people weren't really sure about how to best go about that. But I would say as of now in 2025, like all this information is pretty publicly available, right? Like people know about all this already. So I would say differentiator, honestly, it's we have a pretty good grasp of like, what offers we think will do well, right? Because obviously we can't make every company do well through email. Like there's just certain companies that won't do well through email. So we have a pretty good grasp of like what offers do well in email. But we also do a very good job of like list building, segmentation. I think that's the most important thing. Copywriting is pretty simple. Deliverability is kind of difficult here and there, but for the most part, it's just like send less emails per inbox and validate your list, etc. It's pretty black and white in those cases. But the biggest thing is just spending time building a list, like kind of figure out who to reach out to. Once you figure out who to reach out to, the messaging kind of writes itself.
And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people fail at cold email, because you can validate your leads, you can build great copy, but if you're emailing the wrong person and you're not segmenting correctly, like you're bound to fail. Like that's definitely one of the first things that I learned. Was even when you write your campaigns, you have to segment to different decision makers and what's relevant to them. What do you think is the most common mistake people make in cold emails? Like, I know you and I talk, and you're like, oh my God, I just got this new client and they want me to book 50 meetings in one day. And like, you and I are frustrated because we know what it takes to write a great copy. You've seen it. Like, I see those LinkedIn posts where people say cold email is dead, it's not working for me. What do you think like is the main mistake people are making when they're doing cold email?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those LinkedIn posts, like you'll see my LinkedIn posts, I try to drum up controversy. Like, I don't actually think you should fire all your SDRs, but I would say actually there's two mistakes tied for number one. One is, this is a smaller issue, but I see this a lot recently, especially as cold emails blowing up. People don't really know what they're doing. I see a lot of people spend too much time trying to build some fancy workflow or some crazy automation or use some fancy sales tools. If you don't have a good grasp on sending emails, I think you should actually take a step back, build a very targeted list, spend some time in Apollo, Zoom Info, whatever, use some keywords to find companies that you know for sure you can help, and then write a very targeted email manually at those people, right? And then just send very low volumes. That's number one. People are kind of too caught up on all these fancy tools. So that's the first one. The second one is like, a lot of times I think people are a bit delusional as to like why they're not getting results with email. Like, I'll give you an example. I talk to I have a lot of sales calls, right? So I talk to people selling software development a lot, and they're saying, oh yeah, well, I want to sell. I'm saying this because I've run so many campaigns for this. I know this doesn't work, and maybe I'm wrong. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong. But software development, they'll often tell me, like, oh yeah, I want to do staff augmentation. Like, I want to just email people and offer them software engineers or whatever. And that's like a really hard play to make work. And the way to kind of reframe that, I think people are kind of scared of reframing or whatever. I don't know what it is, but sometimes what you're offering directly is not what people want. But we've had success kind of like flipping that around, because I have a software development client right now, and what we do for them is we use GPT to kind of come up with app ideas that we can build for the prospect. Like, we'll scrape the prospect's company description and we'll say, hey, look, like, we can build you this, and that app. Like, as an example, like, let's say we're emailing a consumer brand, like we're emailing, I don't know, like a tea brand. I think we actually booked a meeting with one. Suggested, hey, we can build you an app to like track your tea consumption and then basically make it easy for your customers to order. Like, that would be an enticing email to receive from someone, just prospecting for software development services. So I think people are not reframing the offer properly. They're like, oh yeah, like if I change this subject line or I change this first line, I'm gonna get more meetings. But it's just like people don't want what you have to offer. So it's like, that's one thing I would say people make a big mistake. Generally, I want to pique their interest in the email, right? Maybe sometimes I need to be a bit vague, or I try to explain some sort of unique mechanism. And the CTA is usually a way to learn more about what they're curious about. So it's like, hey, open to learning more. And I'll add a little blurb like, happy to show you how it works, or like, happy to give you a free trial. Yeah, just going back to the question, I think the biggest mistake I see people make is they're trying all these fancy tools, trying all these AI personalizations, and they don't necessarily have a good understanding of how to write a good cold email from scratch, right? So it's like, take a step back, write some manual outreach messages, and you'll learn way more by doing manual outreach than you will by trying to cram AI and have AI figured out for you.
And how do you feel like tools? Obviously, Clay took the world by surprise. They're already in Series B. They've raised money. They're all over LinkedIn. How do you feel about using Clay for cold emailing?
Yeah, Clay's useful. We use it for personalizations, running larger campaigns, segmenting at scale. If you're an SDR and you can figure out Clay and kind of get it to work for you, like, you're ahead of most people. And I think you should just start your own agency at that point, right? Like, why work for a company?
Do you think Clay and
if you're an SDR, you can figure that out. Like, I think you should just do your own thing.
Work on your own. Like,
yeah, that's my opinion. So,
but yeah. Do you think that if you actually learn how to use Clay and how to build the workflows, is it definitely going to be useful to use in conjunction with an email info tool?
Yeah, for sure. So I think kind of our process, without giving away too many details, right? It's like we work with a lot of more like generic services lately, like not necessarily like unique softwares. We've been working with a lot of services recently, but the way I like to approach email and the way I tell people to approach email is like, start very targeted, manually written segmented emails, right? Send to a small list, relatively small list, maybe under 1,000 people, write targeted emails by hand, personalize the emails by hand, right? And just figure out what works before you try scaling up. And where Clay comes into that equation is you can kind of say, okay, like this messaging worked for me manually. Let's reverse engineer that using Clay. So let's say I target a VP of sales and I sell my sales tool. What I'll do is like, I'll start by writing emails to cybersecurity, to fintech, whatever. And then we're going after VP of sales. Maybe I'll pull a bigger list of VP of sales in different industries, and we'll try to adapt that same format with Clay to those kind of generic targets.
And just pitching the meeting as the call to action versus what you've told me before, like interested in learning more or open to learning more, and teaching them how to do something or getting something back in return. Because I think probably you taught me this, by the way, are the basic 3 cold email basics, which is make more money, save time, and save money.
Yeah.
Those are the 3. And if you're pitching them an idea that's going to help them save time and money, like they're probably going to say yes, but it needs to be relevant and the messaging needs to resonate with them.
Right.
So I love going back to the conversation about the tools. Here's a question that you probably get a lot, and you're going to laugh because this is going to sound familiar. Like, you know how founders are. Once they start seeing success with cold email, they're like, buy 1,000 more domains and get 10,000 inboxes and send more emails. How do you feel about like those companies that come in and take the approach of let's kill the other channels, let's just buy 3,000 or 3 million inboxes and let's just do email? How do you feel on doing just email as a whole and killing every other thing that you have?
It's not as like we do this for a lot of our clients where we're just like we're able to kind of scale it up because we do use GPT to write the messaging. So it's like it's very varied. It's not so simple as just buy more inboxes, right? Like your messaging has to be variated. If I'm sending 10,000, 20,000 of the same email, even if they're spin tags, if I'm sending 10,000 of the same email every single day, invariably it's going to go to spam sooner, right? Because they're not stupid. They could pick up on the format messaging you're sending. So I would say if you're having success, like make sure you're not just like buying more inboxes alone. You have to think about how to vary the messaging. If you're not familiar with GPT, you got to create more campaigns surrounding it. It's not as simple as just buying more inboxes. Even though our company is called Cold Email Hackers, we do cold calls as well. We're testing sending LinkedIn messages. Like we're doing all sorts of different things besides email to find success, right? So it's like multi-channel is the best. I have clients that have very good social presence, right? Like I have a client, which I'm not going to name. You search him up, he's all over YouTube. He's on Google. Like he's pretty famous. So it's like we send emails under his name. And people will look him up and they'll book a meeting. They're so much more likely to book a meeting with us because of
it's creating the emails. What people don't see is the organic traffic. It also creates demand to actually create,
it's like all the channels, it's not like linear, right? It's like it compounds.
I think you're correct because we're doing a mix. We're sending out emails. We're being very successful with it, but we're also doing a mix of cold emailing, using email infrastructure, cold calling, obviously, follow-ups, text, and social. So for me, I'm a never put your eggs all in one basket person. And I think it multi-channel is the way to go.
Yeah. So we had a client, they sell to insurance agents, right? Like individual agents, maybe they have their own like office. We had some success sending emails, right? We're probably getting like 10, 15 meetings a month there, but we added calls. And this is actually the reason I started adding calls to our offering is like this particular client. We started adding calls and we were getting like 5, 6, 7, 8 meetings a day just from calling, right? And just like these people are more receptive over the phone than they are over email. So that was, different audiences you reach out to responding differently.
The call is a warm call because they probably read your email. So they're more familiar with your offer than just cold calling them out of the blue. So talking about metrics, we talked about the craziness of sending more emails. Let's say you're sending out 5,000 emails per day across 5 different campaigns. What do you think success should look like with a benchmark of 5,000 emails per day across 5 different campaigns?
It's super dependent on what you're selling. Like some clients, I would say if you're sending 5,000 emails, you should be getting like at least 10 meetings off that, right? Like 10, 15. And some clients, like you'd be lucky to get
per month, right? Per month.
Yeah, per
month.
No, per day. So like we had some clients, we're sending 5,000 emails, we're getting like 5, 10 meetings a day, right? So it's like, or more, depending. And then some clients, we'd be lucky to get one. Like if you're selling something very technical to enterprise companies, you might be lucky to get one. So it's very dependent.
And regarding the replies, what's a good average rate of like how many replies per 1,000 emails do you think it should be?
It's hard to say as well. Depends on who you're targeting. I would say anywhere from like 2 to 7% is a good benchmark. Of course, it really depends on who you target. It's like a very broad question, right? Like we have clients that, we're targeting like just normal business owners, VP titles at SMBs, and we're getting 5, 6, 7% on average, doing pretty well. And then we have some clients where it's like we're targeting, higher level executives at large companies, and our reply rate's like literally sub 1%. It's like 0.8%. But then it's like when they do respond, usually it's positive.
It's very qualified, or when they do respond, it's like a meeting directly. Like they definitely want to book a meeting.
Exactly. So it's like,
I think like it really depends on your offer. But what I sometimes say is like a good copy normally with like 1,000 emails should be at 1% reply rate, like 10 replies of 10,000 emails, and that doesn't even of 1,000 emails, and it doesn't have to be all positive replies. Like out of 10 replies, at least 2 to 3 positives that lead to one meeting. So with 5,000 emails per day, like a good benchmark could be 2 to 3 meetings per day. And like depending on your offer, but if you're not getting that, like you need to go back to your copy and rewrite it. Another thing is definitely like subject lines. People make these really long subject lines when that subject lines have to be short, 2 or 3 words. I've seen like those crazy ones. Like how do you write a killer cold email with like 5 tips starting with the subject line?
Okay, so obviously you don't want to like lie to people, right? You want to be truthful and honest, but I try to make things sound internal. So I'll give you an example. It's like I have a client that sells public relations services. I literally just titled that subject line PR Q1 first name. Like that's what I'll do. Or even for my own emails, I'll send sales emails. Like I'll say like sales pipeline Q1 first name. Keep it very simple. Make it seem like something their boss would send them.
Perfect. What about the body? How many lines or paragraphs do you think it should be in general?
I would say 4 to 5 sentences typically. We've been finding lately shorter emails inbox in Outlook much better. We've been having some success with like super short 2-3 sentence emails, but you're gonna have to play around with it. I would say 5 sentences at most typically, and just like read out loud. Does it flow well? Does it sound awkward? Does it sound robotic? Like, does it sound like something human wrote? And more importantly, make sure they understand what you're saying. Because I see a lot of people, they'll write emails that are really buzzwordy. They'll sell a SaaS solution. They'll be like, oh yeah, we're a cloud-based AI, blah, blah, blah. Like, nobody cares. They want to know what end result you can get them. But not only do they want to know what end result you can get them, they want to know, it's like, is this something I've been pitched before? Everybody's been pitched SEO over cold email. So it's like, that's not so unique.
Everybody's been pitched staff augmentation service.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, yeah, so it's like you got to kind of figure out a way to spin it. So the way I typically do this is like, if it's a software company, they have a very innovative solution. I'll be a little more specific about how we're doing things. But if it's something kind of like SEO, I'll find a different way of spinning it. Like, let's say we sell SEO and I'm targeting lawyers, right? Or let's just say home contractors as an example. In the US, where do home contractors typically get their leads? They get it from like Angie's List. So instead of saying, hey, I'll help you rank higher, I frame it as, hey, we'll get you guaranteed leads at a cheaper cost and that are more exclusive than if you went to Angie's List. That's how I would frame it. So that's kind of went on a tangent there, but that's body of the email. That's sort of generally how I do things.
Love it. What about, I think, the signature? I know what you're going to say about this. How do you feel about pictures or hyperlinks in the signature?
Cold email, plain text only, no images, no banners, no colored text, no bold text, no links. I mean, if you have to have a link, a simple link is probably fine. I don't use it. You're going to have to test this yourself, but I just say keep it as simple as possible. Have an address, like no HTML in the signature, just plain text. Just keep it very simple.
Have an address because it shows that you're real. You guys will not believe how many fake companies and fake names exist in cold email. And like an address is like, it makes you look real. It shows that you're real. The final is the PS line. I know you're a big fan as well as me. I always add a PS line. How do you feel about PS lines?
Yeah, we find that so we do AI personalized PS lines. They're usually kind of cheesy, like, hey, I see you live in Chicago. Like, I like going to this area, blah, blah, blah. First, I find if you've kind of got it down, people are a bit more friendly. They're less likely to report you to spam. That's number one. But it also adds some variance to the emails, right? Like we already do spin tags, we do AI written emails. Why not just add another thing there? And another thing we're experimenting with, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think people will start figuring this out sooner rather than later. So I may as well say it, is like, historically people sending cold emails, they'll say, hey, like reply unsub if you don't want me to email you anymore, or they'll add an
I'm
unsubscribe
doing
link.
that.
My theory is that their spam filters are able to pick up on this, and we're just kind of doing another failsafe there. So in the PS line, I might say, hey, look, I see you're in LA. I love going to Griffith Park. And then what I'll do is I'll just say, hey, look, and just, if you don't want me to email you, just let me know, just reply and I'll take you off. I just try to make it look natural. So I don't know if that helps, but that's something I'm trying right now.
It's true. Like with Google having Gemini now and all of these AI tools that they have preventing spam, like you and I suffered from that last year, like all of the changes that Google did, then they took them away. Nobody's doing Outlook nowadays because of everything that we added. So Justin, it's been a pleasure having you as our first guest. I was so hyped about this. So before we let you go, what advice would you give to people getting started on cold email? If it was you and you were starting from zero, what advice would you give people?
Best advice I could give is, so much good advice I can give, but I would say the biggest thing, I've already kind of alluded to this, is just like, don't try to overscale things from the beginning, send low volumes, write emails, really understand who you're selling to. Look at what's worked for you in the past, right? Have you made cold calls? Have you done ads? Have you done whatever? Have you talked to customers? What do customers say to you on calls? That's the best way to kind of figure out how to structure the emails. So
social proof, things that actually work with the target audience that you're doing.
Yeah. That's what I would say. And then another thing as well is on the technical side, just, I don't know why people have this fixation on like tracking clicks and opens. Just don't track clicks and opens. That's like number one, like don't do that. And when you're sending cold emails, like let's say you buy a bunch of inboxes, be more conservative on the volume. I think people don't realize like how conservative you have to be now. Like when I first started, I had one primary domain and I was sending hundreds of emails every day, right? Just from one inbox. Now it's like a lot of our clients were sending less than 5 emails per inbox per day. So it's like, I don't know how this is for Google, of course. I'm using Google inboxes, but it's like, you got to kind of be more conservative than you think you need to be.
Great advice. And it was a pleasure having you. I had so much fun, and everybody stay tuned for our second episode dropping soon.